with the interviewer, and then when you want to make the point, you look a foot behind the camera, because that's when they know you're talking directly to them. Ronald Reagan.
So who are you?
I am Don McGowan, not in fact Ronald Reagan. I am a lawyer with Microsoft.
A lawyer?
Yes, the four horsemen of the apocalypse are riding. You have an attorney in front of you. My client.
You're the first one, by the way, on Channel 9. So.
Oh, spectacular!
Yeah. I figured since you guys control all of our lives, we'd have you on Channel 9.
It's okay, because if I don't like what you say, I'll just pull it off the web anyways. Take down notice to Robert Scoble.
Like I listen?
Yeah. Fair enough. I'm the lawyer for Microsoft Game Studios and Xbox marketing. So I'm the Master Chief's lawyer, I am Conker's lawyer, I am Joanna Dark's lawyer.
Oh, excellent.
And
so Larry Herb has to listen to you.
Larry Herb doesn't know that yet.
So you just started that job a week ago.
Yeah, I only kicked into that. Well, I've been transitioning in since November, but I kicked into it on Monday. For a year and a half before that, I was in sort of the government affairs security policy department of Microsoft, doing company-wide messaging on security issues, Windows, Office, any other thing that might have come up. Xbox didn't come up so much, frankly, but now that we have a new console, as it turns out, people think they can hack it, and they're wrong.
Yep. Well, they say there's new chip mods coming. We'll see how that works.
We'll see how well that works out for them. But it is the core of 3 Mac G5s in the 360, right?
Yeah.
And don't I always read on the interweb that the Mac is unhackable?
Ah.
So this is I think we're safe then.
Yeah. Now, one reason I want you on instead of any other, because there's hundreds of lawyers here, right?
The legal department of Microsoft, lawyers, government affairs people, whatever, 810 people.
Wow.
Yeah.
Wow. What do you guys all do?
As little as possible.
And you charge us $300 an hour for it.
No, you see, you pay wholesale for us, not retail.
Oh, okay.
So you only pay us a salary just like everybody else. No, I mean, the kicker is why we have so many lawyers here is because obviously what Microsoft is it's an intellectual property company, more than pretty much any other company in the world. Yeah. I mean, without laws to protect IP, we're nothing. So we have to have a lot of people in place to make sure that we can take care of that as much as we can. And I'm given to understand intellectual property has worked out pretty well for Microsoft so far.
Well, I built this.
Yes. It paid for this lovely camera that's videotaping me.
Yep.
So.
Even if it is cheap.
Exactly. Do you say videotaping now that it's digital, or do you say like recording? Or?
Well, this is still tape, so
okay.
I still record on the tape.
You're so old school.
I know. I tried one of the new JVC hard drive cameras, and the workflow took more time than dealing with the tape. Plus, tape is a great backup. $6 for 4 gigs.
Oh, exactly.
And it sits on my shelf, and I can move it around really easily. Where after shooting for I don't know how many videos, 500 videos, something like that. Yeah. Several hundred videos at 4 gigs a piece. Starts taking up a lot of hard drive space, and then you need 2 hard drives to make sure you have backup.
Yeah.
You have to have a whole workflow.
And of course, redundancy. You're going to have to store it and store the other hard drive remotely.
Yep. So anyway, let's start out if you were outside of Microsoft.
Yeah.
And you were maybe a kid who just came out of MIT, or like a friend went to Carnegie Mellon and has a cool piece of technology. How do you protect that? What would be the steps that you would take to make sure that you didn't get it ripped off, or that Microsoft didn't come in and copy it without you being able to do anything?
Well, of course, Microsoft doesn't do that kind of thing, right? Microsoft is a wonderful, beautiful company that actually is full of bunnies and kitty cats.
No, that's Google. Google has the fluffy bunnies. No, everybody on Channel 9 knows that.
Oh, that's true, actually. Google does no evil. Just ask them. Yeah. I think, okay, this is where I have to do the mandatory, you can never talk to a lawyer without us totally disclaiming ourselves away from anything, right?
Yeah.
I am not providing legal advice at this point. I am providing information there. That's actually a technical requirement for us, because my client is Microsoft Corp. And so anything I say about law can be construed as attorney-client unless I tell people, you're not my client, Microsoft is my client. Now let's get to your actual question, now that we've gotten all the nicky.
See what dealing with lawyers is like.
and imagine there's 800 of us. So you're coming out, you've got a cool idea. Well, what you're describing to me already makes me sort of step back and say, it sounds like your cool idea is a thing.
Yep.
as opposed to an idea in itself, as opposed to something you've written down.
Yeah.
Okay, if it's a thing, if it's an object, you want to patent it if you can.
Okay.
And the reason you want to patent it is twofold. One is a very practical reason, which is that patents are the way that you protect things.
Okay.
There's sort of, you hear a lot of people talk about intellectual property, and there's various types of intellectual property protections. Basically, there are four.
Let me just turn off this screen over here. Keep talking.
There's copyright. Copyright is how you protect the written down expression of an idea. That's not what we're talking about here, but that's why you protect code with copyright, because code is written down. Okay, so the second thing is there's trademark, and that's how you protect an individual word and say, we're using this word in a very specific sense and we want to make sure nobody else can use, like Coca-Cola, to talk about soda. Okay, so that's two. The third thing is what we call trade secret, which is just a way where you have this thing that you never tell anybody. And the object lesson for that is the secret formula for Coke.
Yeah.
Right, which has never been told to anybody. And that's because if you copyrighted it, eventually the copyright would run out and everybody could make it.
Yeah.
Trademark, everybody knows it. Patent, eventually the patent filing runs out.
Yep.
But trade secret, you can protect it forever.
Yeah.
None of these works for a thing, because a thing is an actual object in the world. So what you do with the actual object in the world is you patent it. And by patenting it, what you're saying is, I came up with an idea. My idea is that a thing should be able to do this particular activity.
Yeah.
And no one else should be able to do this because I thought of it first. And then basically, if you've come up with it and you're the first guy to come up with it, you get a legal monopoly to exploit that idea for the next 20 years. 10 and 10 because you have to refile 10 years in, but 20 years.
Yeah. Why do certain patents get filed for stupid ideas or stupid things or things that seem to everybody to be obvious? You know.
It's funny.
And we all know what we're talking about, right?
That's actually a really good question, and it's because, and I was actually dealing with this with somebody in a different context pretty recently. It's that it's obvious to you and me.
Yeah.
It's not necessarily obvious to a guy looking at it who doesn't know anything about the topic.
Yeah.
Okay, and by the way, I'm not dismissing it because I'm going to get back to that in a second. But a guy who doesn't know anything about that is like the dictionary definition of the patent office, right? They look at hundreds of thousands, if not millions, of patents a year.
Yeah.
So what they end up with is they end up with a situation where they just can't know everything about everything. Now they specialize a little bit, but to them, this is something they've never seen before. And you know, if you work in the patent office and you're like the software guy in the patent office, odds are you've seen a fair number of things. So if you haven't seen it before, that's a good sign that this might be original. Sometimes it's not. Sometimes it's things that you and I would sit here and say, I can't believe that patent was issued. It is so obvious.
Yeah.
Two comments on that. One is that sometimes it's only obvious in retrospect.
Yeah.
Sometimes, and you know, you and I can think of examples of these till the cows come home, where you say, well, of course it had to work that way. But the fact is, it could have worked any number of ways, and it's just, you know, it had to work one. So they just grabbed one way and patented it. Okay, well then, that's a different situation than what I'm about to get to, which is just a patent that should have never been given. And those exist. And I don't think anybody would deny it. And that's why somebody who comes along and says a patent like that should have just never been given out should be allowed to, and actually is allowed to, go forth and say, I am going to challenge this patent in front of the court. I'm going to say, you know what, you shouldn't get 20 years of exclusivity on this idea because it's not worth that. There's a problem with that system, which is it costs you $1 million to do what I've just described.
Yeah.
And you know what? Like, in an ideal world, that's not fair. Unfortunately, there are many trade-offs that we make, and especially that we make in the United States, and one of them is that you got to pay to play. And so, unfortunately, you know, and everything, frankly, from healthcare right through to challenging patents, if you can't pay, you can't play.
Yeah.
I might have structured the system differently.
Yeah.
But then we'd be paying 70% income tax.
Oh, that's interesting.
Take it from a Canadian, man.
We've been living in Canada.
Yeah, I was going to say, take it from a Canadian. When you got things that don't cost money, they cost money. It's just called income tax.
Yeah. What would you like people to know about your job? That maybe there's myths out there that
Well, I mean, the first, like, we're not as evil as... Okay, we are evil. But we're not as evil
I was about to call you on that one.
We're not as evil. There are preconceived notions about everybody. I mean, I'm sure there are many programmers who've kissed a girl.
Yeah.
Okay? There are some lawyers who aren't evil.
Yeah.
A lot of us are, and frankly, a lot of us in our job, we got to do things that aren't a lot of fun.
Yeah.
I can tell you that I personally have had, in the year and a half that I've been here, have had to sort of... Anybody at Microsoft who reads DLs has come across my name if they've come across certain DLs.
That's why I invited you over.
Yeah, and sometimes they'll see me and they'll see me doing things like, okay, guys, could we please not talk about this? Sometimes that's an unfortunate thing to have to do. It certainly doesn't make you any friends.
Yeah.
Killing features in a product is nasty. You don't like. It's not like we get up in the morning and think, oh, how can I kill this feature in your product? But I think the thing that really, like, if I could dispel one notion about us as a profession, it's a lot of people think that we don't care. Mm-hmm. It's not that we don't care. It's that we don't know enough about what you guys do for a living to know how to fix the problems or how to help you fix the problems. And so it comes across as we don't care. And let me give you a great example of that.
Okay.
I will sit from time to time in feature meetings where people are, pitching a feature that they want to put into a product, and they will describe the feature, and some aspect of it will be nasty, and I'll have to say, sorry, like, you have to rework this feature. And then they'll look at me and they'll say, how can I rework it to make it legal? And unless I know a fair amount about how, for example, if they're talking about a particular feature to Windows, unless I know exactly how that's going to interface with the rest of the operating system, I can't describe to them how it's going to work and be legal.
Yeah.
And so what they end up hearing from us, and understandably, is we're telling you can't do it, and we're not telling you what you can do to make it better.
Yeah.
And like that's unfortunate. And the way to fix that is unfortunately outside of everybody's control, because the way to fix that is to change the way that people think about lawyers and change the way that lawyers think about lawyers. Because right now, our training and teaching in our right back to law school is that our job is a meta job. It doesn't matter. It's kind of like writing code, okay? In the sense that if you know how to write C, or I guess C# now, if you know how to write C#, you could write a game or the spell check feature for Office, because it's all just code.
Yep.
So for you, it's code. For us, it's law. You could be a lawyer about anything. It doesn't matter, because all you need to know is law. And I don't think that's true. I think you got to know a lot about what your people are doing. The problem is we don't even know, some of us, how to start.
Yeah. And law is an alternative reality, really, isn't
Yes.
it? It's not, if we were out, just having fun, we would have one reality, but the law is a completely different reality.
I actually usually tell people that if something dumb is happening and you don't understand why, tax and antitrust will usually explain 90% of those.
Inside the company here.
Everywhere. Tax and antitrust will explain 90% of the weird things that you come across in the world. It was actually funny. I was working when I was back in private practice. I was looking at a particular transaction that I was being asked to comment on, and the tax guys were describing it to me, and I sort of at the end of it looked at them and said, "Wow, what you've just done and what you've just described to me is indistinguishable from a company whose name starts with an E and rhymes with Benron."
Yeah.
And they sort of looked at me and they said, "Well, what we're describing is nothing more than a very standard tax shelter." And that was when I realized, you know what? A lot of things are explained away by perfectly legitimate legal mechanisms.
Yeah.
And they just don't seem to make sense to the outside world.
Yeah. Lawyers lawyers get blamed for a lot of things that other people really did, don't they?
Yeah.
That's the standard thing. Oh, it was the lawyer's fault.
We're a pretty good scapegoat. We do a lot of things wrong, but we're a pretty good scapegoat.
Yeah.
It's a combination.
Well, because you can't stick up for yourselves.
We can't, and we choose not to sometimes.
Yeah, and explain why not. Because I think that's where we started talking a year ago.
Yeah.
Was why can't you have a blog? Why can't you tell the world why?
Well, I do now.
Well, you do, but you still don't get into, why things are happening today. You can't stick up for yourself for some legal reasons, right?
Yeah, certainly there are some legal reasons why, and a part of it is the sort of spokesman, representative of the company role that I can come back to in a minute. Part of it is just, well, first of all, to the public, and again, anybody who's seen me do these things on DLs, and if you're not at Microsoft and you're seeing this, you have no idea what I'm talking about, but you will, because we will own you.
We have lots of internal
discussion lists,
email mailing lists, and you show up there quite frequently.
From time to time, I'll come in and I'll say things like, "Listen, I'd love to give you the answer to this, but I can't because there are people on this discussion who don't work for Microsoft." Because of course, if you're a vendor or a contingent staff or whatever, you're not employed by Microsoft. You're employed by Volt or Excel or whoever, and you are providing services for Microsoft. And some of my best friends are vendors. And
my wife's a vendor.
So. There we go. We couldn't function without them.
Yeah.
But the fact is, there are just some times where the things that are really going through my head, I can't tell anybody except people who work for Microsoft, and frankly, except people at Microsoft who have a need to know.
Yeah.
That's the attorney-client privilege thing that I was talking about earlier, and that sucks sometimes. Yeah. So sometimes we just have to go dark for no reason.
Yeah.
Other times, and that sort of bridges back into why I feel I can have more of a blog role now than I could before. Back when I was doing security policy and security messaging, right? Like, my job was to represent the company's opinion on these topics. So I can't really get out there into the world and say what I'm saying is my own opinion.
Yeah.
When my opinion expressed to the world is actually, in many circumstances, the company's opinion.
Yeah.
And that's tough. And so it means sometimes you can't talk about things that would be interesting. And frankly, unfortunately, it's the people who have the knowledge who are sometimes unable to speak.
Yeah. That gets to one of the liabilities of blogging, isn't it?
Yeah.
Because we have 2,500 people out there speaking on. A lot of them think that they're just putting out their own personal opinions, but a lot of the press, a lot of the other people think that's Microsoft.
Yeah.
And I even talked about, with somebody from the BBC who was mouthing off on his blog, and I said, to me, you are the BBC, and that probably is an unfair thing to do to a single person, right?
But it gives me hives. It's tough because, yeah, you have these people who are talking about the thing that they're passionate about because they work in it and they do it every single day, and that's great. And I don't think anybody who's got any sense wants to stop that from happening or even control it, right? Like, I think the net gains of blogging and the net gains of the unfettered communication that the internet has brought are just so leaps and bounds better than any residual and ancillary problems, and that's really what they are, residual and ancillary.
Yeah. That
it's just such a big gain. Every now and then you'll get an edge case, and you're entirely right. That dude from the BBC is the BBC to you. The person from whatever product team, and I may grab IE just because IE from time to time is an example that I use for various things. It's nothing about any IE person, but a guy from the IE team blogging is the IE team. And to give you a very specific example of not in the IE space, the Sony digital rights management brouhaha that happened a few weeks ago. The place where Microsoft was said to have announced its response to that was on a blog.
Yep.
And the blog was the blog of a guy named Jason Garms.
Yep.
And Jason Garms is the lead architect for anti-spyware. Yep. So at that point, is he making an official statement on behalf of Microsoft? Now, I know Jason, and I'm pretty sure that when Jason makes a statement about what his product is going to contain, you can bet money that his product is going to react in that way. Yep. And he expects the world to think of it that way. Okay. Does that mean that Jason Garms' blog is an official blog of Microsoft?
Yep.
Tough question. You get slammed for it all the time.
Oh, yeah. Well, and they play it both ways,
yeah.
Right? At one stance, I'm an individual person who is just mouthing off, and at another stance, I'm like the voice of Microsoft.
Yeah, I actually love sometimes looking at the people slamming you, and just for, as best I can tell, no apparent reason.
Yeah.
Just taking, calling you a corporate shill. Trust me, if Robert Scoble was a corporate shill, it wouldn't take a camera for me to get in front of him. But that's, it's not a fair thing for people to do to people, but it's instinctive. And the fact that it's instinctive and the fact that it resonates means that on some level it must make sense.
Yeah. Where else should we go?
Isn't that our slogan? Where do you want to go today?
Where do we want to go today?
Or did we give that one up? For our potential, your passion.
Yeah.
Or your potential, our passion, or whatever. You notice I can't even remember the slogan?
No, I can't either.
That's probably that's probably a bad thing. Naming.
Let's get to naming. Because
Speaking of trademarks,
we have the worst names in the industry.
Only now. I'm going to fight you hard. I will fight anybody on that. Only now. We used to have the best names in the business. Like Microsoft Windows is like one of the strongest brands in the world. Microsoft, some survey was just conducted by, I think it was the Kellogg Management School, finding that Microsoft's brand portfolio is second most powerful, most valuable brand portfolio in the world, second only to Coca-Cola.
Yep.
We have amazingly strong brands. Microsoft Windows, Microsoft Office, Xbox. Xbox is, for me, a particularly special instance because it's one of the only names we've come up with recently that's not a purely descriptive name.
Yep.
In the sense, and I don't mean that in the technical legal sense. I mean in the sense of it's not
Microsoft Windows Tablet Edition.
Exactly. That's exactly it. Microsoft
for students or something
like Windows Desktop Search with MSN Search Technology or whatever it's called, and that to me is a descriptive name. As in the sense of Xbox is more of a brand.
Yeah.
And I think that's partly why our names are so long now and so, shall we say, non-enthusiastic. It's difficult to get aroused by them. I actually think one of our particular issues is that we need a name for our search technology.
Yeah.
We need to talk about whatever, like micro search. MSN search is too long.
Yeah.
There's a reason that Google became a verb.
Yeah.
And micro search, because we didn't use it, didn't.
Yeah.
Or whatever.
Yeah.
And that's tough. And it's also kind of tough for Yahoo, which is to say nothing about Excite. But the fact is, our names right now incorporate a lot of words to say something that we don't say with a brand.
Now, see, the reason I asked you about that is somebody blamed it on the lawyers and said the lawyers make us do these descriptive names so we won't get sued for, because we pick a stupid name and do our searches, and lo and behold, some little company is already using that name and sues us. And
they're not wrong. Sometimes they're not wrong, and I'm going to slip back to that in a second because that actually bridges into a longer discussion.
Okay.
They're not wrong, but also they're not 100% right. Okay. Partly it's because if we've used a name and we're trying to build a brand around that name, we might incorporate that name into brands where, we might incorporate that brand into other names where the same technology is being used. And that's where like Windows Desktop Search with MSN Search Technology or whatever it's called comes from. Yeah. Is building in those brands in an attempt to build a brand around the name. Now the second thing is getting sued. Okay, like no question, people will sue Microsoft more than they will sue, small company that's just starting up out in Silicon Valley. Like that's the nature of the beast.
Because we have deep pockets.
We have deep pockets.
We are the definition of deep pockets, aren't we?
We have deep pockets and we got a lot of money, but also, I mean, the fact is, a name that is likely, the lawyers are going to say no to a lot of things where the answer is I'm not sure. And that's an artifact of what we're asked to do in a corporate environment. And actually, it's one of the things that I sort of bump up against myself in the way that I work, which is a little different than some of my colleagues. And that's that. And I'm actually there's an article coming out that I've written for TechNet magazine that's coming out in one of the upcoming issues about how to deal with legal, and it goes into this a little bit, which is you ask us a question that is a shades of gray answer, and you want a black or white response. And understandably. But the second that you ask for a black and white response to a shades of gray, the only way we can answer it is to say no. Is to say you may not do the thing you're doing. Because then we'll never be wrong.
Yeah.
Because if there's a way to do it that would be okay, and a way not to do it that would be okay, or a way to do it that wouldn't be okay, and you're asking me today, tell me and I'm not going to tell you which way I'm going. Tell me whether I can do this thing. Then I have to tell you no, because otherwise I might be wrong. And if I'm wrong, there's a really big consequence to that. It's that we get sued.
Yeah.
And developers have their errors thrown out into the world in the sense that they can get hacked, their software can get hacked, bugs can be found, whatever. Our errors are broadcast on the national news.
Yeah.
They are played out in front of juries. And it's an uncomfortable situation. I was a trial attorney before I ever got to Microsoft.
Really?
So I know what it's like.
How long have you been doing this?
I've been here. I got to
How
Microsoft
long
for the
have you been
security.
a lawyer?
9 years.
9 years.
I was an intellectual property, copyright, trademark, computer technology, so computer tech and privacy and security, and antitrust litigator ever before I got to Microsoft.
Oh, wow.
So
on which side? Antitrust? Government side or the
no, private side. I did one of the last files I ever did was an antitrust file on the plaintiff's side for a company that's usually on the defendant's side, and that was an interesting experience. But the point being, if you're asking us to say whether or not you can do something in an environment where if we're wrong, it will mean a product has to get pulled off the shelf, or stop shipped, we're always going to tell you no. And that's why a lot of us want to actually integrate a lot more into the decision-making process, and people don't understand why. They look at us as like, it's a pain in the ass to have to deal with legal. From where we're sitting, it's if you ask us too far in advance and don't give us a chance to integrate and say, you can take this route but not that route. If you ask us in advance to tell you whether all routes will be acceptable, we have to tell you no.
Yeah.
And that sucks.
With 800 lawyers, why does Microsoft still ship things that get sued? Why do mistakes get made? Since you call them mistakes.
Yeah, I'll call them mistakes because the fact is, like, everything, nobody's perfect. And one of the ways that a good company will try and mitigate against nobody being perfect is to have multiple people in the chain so that you have failovers and fail-safes. And our failover and fail-safe is to have multiple people in the chain. The legal department of Microsoft is actually sort of structured in a matrix in the way that there are some people who their job is to do a little bit of everything for a particular product. There are other people whose job is to do the same thing across a bunch of products.
Yep.
And I've gone from being one of those horizontal roles to being one of those vertical roles. And so that's how we try and build a little redundancy into the system. Is if I miss something, there's somebody else who may have caught it. Yeah. But the fact is, it doesn't happen sometimes. And frankly, sometimes you got to you got to just push forward on things.
Take some risk.
Well, it's not a question of take some risk. It's more a question of you've got to say, you know what? You can never know 100% of everything. Yeah. We have to get to the 90-10.
Right.
And so long as you know you're at the 90-10 and you don't think you were at 100, that's, I think, the most important thing.
Yeah. Where was I going? It's that the answer you just gave me. It sounds a lot. I speak to a lot of companies, other companies, about blogging, and I see the fear in their eyes, and that's one of them that most companies can't get over is, wait a second, I'm going to have somebody at 2 a.m. writing on his own, sort of representing the company and fighting, PR battles on the street, basically, on our behalf without any committee running it. And that just totally, they can't wrap their head around that.
They should.
Yeah.
They should wrap their head around it because the fact is, these conversations have been going on for a long time. They were going on before the internet.
Yeah.
I mean, the Federalist Papers, to go sort of way back, was nothing more than a very low-tech version of a blog. I actually make fun of people when I go into meetings and they're writing little notes to each other on pieces of paper because we don't allow laptops in the meeting. And I say they're doing AIM, which is almost instant messaging.
Yeah.
And that, this same sort of thing has been going on since, I think, the invention of handwriting. Yeah. The only difference is really now the ability to reach a broader audience and, thankfully, the ability to be a little bit more eloquent and correct things if you said something that you wish you hadn't.
Yeah.
And that's different than wrong.
Yeah.
Sometimes you can be wrong and still be happy that you said the wrong thing. Sometimes you wish you hadn't said something because you just made it like a stupid fact mistake, right? And I always notice this in the media websites, the mainstream media, where you'll see them take a story and they just got a fact wrong, and some of them will just slipstream a change, and some of them will comment it and whatever. I always find that sort of an interesting thing to look at. One, because I'm really one of the most anal people you're ever going to meet, but secondly, because
is that a requirement for a lawyer? By the way?
I think so. That and just general pessimism. There was actually a survey, and this is like one of those apocryphal things where I know I saw a news story reporting on the study, and I can't find either the news story or the study, and I didn't put it in my favorites list, so I don't know where it is anymore. About how pessimists are not surprisingly they don't have a lot of job satisfaction unless they become attorneys. And at which point their job satisfaction level is the highest of any job anywhere.
Interesting.
Because a lawyer's job is to tell you everything that can go wrong.
Yeah.
And so where could you be happier than to be a professional pessimist? Come up with all the ways. I think
that's going to be my headline. Don McGowan, professional pessimist.
Come up with all the ways this thing can go wrong on me. And it's like, all right, well, that's like the clear blue sky. Well, something could fall from the sky and crush your entire management team.
Yeah.
They could all be hit by satellite.
What gets you over your fear to sit down for an interview with Scoble?
Well, besides the knowledge that I can get your entire website pulled.
Oh, yeah, that's true. Although even that doesn't work, because I could go to the Internet Archive and put the video out there and say,
or you could throw in the torrents. Yep. No, again, the whole thing about, sometimes you just got to sit down and say, hey, like, the conversation is going to go on whether I take part in it or not.
Yep.
The least I can do is let people know what is going on in my head.
Yeah.
And you've on those emails that I'll send out to people in the Microsoft discussions, I will get 15 or 20 people sometimes writing me back individually saying, "Hey, listen, like, what on earth made you think that? Here is a fact that you might not have known. Here's a position you might not have considered. Whatever." And frankly, sometimes I'll come back into the discussion later and say, "You know what? Like, somebody came back to me," and I'll always, unless they tell me they don't want me to do it, I'll always say who was. Because I think that person, people should have the right to know that it's okay to stand up and challenge somebody who looks to be in a position of authority.
Yep.
And the best way to do it is to know that individual human beings like them and like me have done that.
Yep.
Everybody must feel they can speak truth to power. And the fact is, you take part in a conversation because people's opinions have value and merit. Mm-hmm. And they should know, and they do know, and it's good that they know that their opinions have truth and value.
Yeah. What's the biggest fear for lawyers who have, who have so many bloggers out there? You probably have nightmares in the middle of the night, going, "Oh my God, Scoble could get me in so much trouble," or not just Scoble, but any a kid coming here out of college who really doesn't know patent law or IP, or I can think of 20 ways that a company can get in trouble.
I can think of 100.
Yeah.
I can think of 100 that you could do by the end of the day. I'm not telling, by the way.
Okay. You're not giving me any ideas for my next blog post.
Yeah, you want to kill something, you got to figure out the way to do it yourself.
Yep.
I think the big fear that people have is that you'll get a blogger who blends their role.
Yeah.
And that to me is like, if I could sort of take people aside and give them one thing to go home with. I think at the end of the day, everybody wants to do the right thing. Yeah. And there are a few people who don't, but we call them psychopaths and we put them in prison. Like, yeah. That's the kind of person who doesn't want to do the right thing, but everybody else wants to do the right thing. What we fear is people who blend their roles. And again, I'm going to use the IE example, and I'm not talking about anybody in the IE team. It's just I was trying to think at one point of an example of this. If you got a guy from the IE team who was to say, okay, this is a feature we're building into Internet Explorer.
Yeah.
And we're looking at doing it for Internet Explorer 7. And until we've got that in place, go ahead and please go use Firefox.
Okay.
Okay, that's in many ways an unpleasant scenario for me.
Yep.
Because that's a person saying, and it's cool to say we would like to learn from our competitors.
Yeah.
Because anybody who thinks we can't learn from our competitors is just horribly wrong and also an idiot.
Yeah.
Anybody who sends somebody to our competitors, again, that's an unfortunate situation. But remember who this guy is. This is a person from the IE team.
Yeah.
Now, we talked a little bit earlier about the sort of, that guy from the BBC is the BBC to you.
Yeah.
So now what's happening is you have somebody from the IE team saying, go ahead and use the other product.
Yep.
And it's...
And I do this a lot. So
but you're not on the IE team.
No,
and that
true.
to me is a huge difference.
Okay.
Because to the world, you're not saying, well, the Internet Explorer team is telling you to use Firefox.
Right.
Whereas to the world, it's a much more difficult situation when you're talking about the thing that is your core job.
Yeah.
To then say, by the way, that's my own opinion. Because that same guy on his blog on the IE team may tomorrow come back and say, hey, you know what? We have discovered this problem with the way we were implementing, and I'm just grabbing an example out of the air, with the way we were implementing the phishing toolbar.
Yeah.
And so we've decided to rework it. And so that's going to cause us to slip ship for a month.
Yeah.
Right? And remember we were talking earlier about Jason Garms and how sometimes people will actually make statements about their products in their blogs.
Yep.
So now, when this guy was talking about Firefox yesterday, was he giving his own opinion? Was he giving the team's opinion? Was he saying something that the company thinks? When you slide back and forth like that,
yep.
you make it difficult for your audience to know whether you're acting as an official spokesman or not.
Yep.
That is the kind of thing that gives us hives.
Yep.
Because subsequently, I think I'm not telling tales out of school when I say Microsoft has had some problems with internal emails being taken out of context.
Oh, yeah.
We don't really want to crush people.
Yep.
But the fact is, blogs like those create the ideal circumstance for somebody to take something out of context.
Yep.
Because it raises questions.
Yep. Yep. And it's easy to get quoted. Then the Wall Street Journal took an entire post of mine and put it on their opinion page without even asking. Well, I sort of give everybody the ability to do that, you know, but it's nice to know.
It would
hey,
be nice
we're
to
the
get
Wall
some
Street
warning.
Journal. We're going to print tomorrow.
Yeah, I remember seeing that. This is by the way is how you know a lawyer is. You know a lawyer by how much of the Wall Street Journal do you read is eventually how much are you likely to become a lawyer. I read the sports page in the Wall Street Journal.
Excellent.
Which only exists online, but it's great.
Yep. Back to if you're a developer on the outside world.
Yeah.
How do you know you need to see a patent attorney? When is the time to call a patent attorney, or when is the time to start thinking about that?
When you think your idea is going to work. When you think your idea is workable enough that you could actually bake it into an invention.
Okay.
If you come up with a cool idea, if you think your idea is cool enough, you're probably not going to go around telling the world. Patent lawyers have two rules, and one of them isn't an obvious one. One of them is to file patents, that's obvious. The other one is to give a circumstantial guarantee of reliability and authenticity to your idea. Okay? Because you will not be able to engage. There are not many patent lawyers. In order to become a patent lawyer, especially in the United States, it's very difficult. You have to actually, first requirement is your undergraduate degree has to be a science degree and on a list of approved science degrees, or else you cannot become a member of the patent bar.
Really?
Yeah.
I didn't know.
You cannot get licensed to practice before the U.S. Patent and Trademark Office as a patent attorney unless you have specific qualifications. That's one of them. So it's a limited bar. And what that does is it sort of drives up the caliber of the average member of the patent bar. They're all very, very smart people. They're like as close as we get to propeller heads.
Okay.
And they're taking you on and starting to draft a patent for you is therefore a way of them saying, I think this is a protectable idea.
Yeah.
I think what you've got is something that's for real. It might not be original because somebody else might have done it or whatever, right? But it's for real. Okay. So if you're going to try and get funding from a company for your idea, and you can say, I have a patent application under development right now for the idea. Mm-hmm. And this, by the way, is why you always want to put people under NDAs, because then you preserve your patentability.
Yeah.
But at that point, what you're saying to them is two things. One, I think I have an idea. and two, somebody else at least agrees with me enough that they would pass up other work opportunities to write this patent application.
Got it.
Because remember, this is a limited bar. These people are all busy.
Yeah.
It's not like your average attorney who's running around will take any old damn file because they want to get paid.
Yeah.
These guys get paid.
Yeah. And some very well.
And some very, very well.
Yeah.
It is a highly lucrative field.
Yeah, one of my best customers in the camera store was a patent attorney. I found out the first day he came in, he bought a $3,000 camera system from me. The first day he came in, he won a $6 million lawsuit. So it's like he was celebrating.
Well, I mean, look at that device that competes with Microsoft Windows Mobile 5.0 that has had some patent issues recently. You can see how much money's in patents.
Yeah, a lot.
Yeah.
If you're a kid joining a big company, you can even take it outside of Microsoft. What do you need to know about, working inside a big company, and when you should be calling a lawyer?
When you should call legal?
Yeah, when you should call internal legal.
Okay, first thing, you've just made a big assumption, which is that there's internal legal. Usually that's true in a large company. Not always. Sometimes there are companies that just decide, we're going to outsource as much of this as possible, and we'll just have a few people who serve senior executives. What you should know about when you're going to call internal legal is going to depend a lot on your company.
Okay.
It's going to depend a lot on the role that your company has assigned for its internal legal staff. Sometimes, some companies' internal legal staff also do business development, which is, I think, a weird role. I think asking a lawyer to do business development is like asking a fish to ride a bicycle. Yeah. We don't get trained for it properly, but apparently some people do it and they're very good. When somebody's threatening to sue you is usually a good time.
Yep.
When you think you're going to need to sue somebody else, also usually a good time. When you think you've just come up with an idea that could be patentable is a great time. When you're doing something that when you're doing something in your workspace or in your work life, because I don't want to talk about employment related things, but when you're doing something that's you think is core to what your company does, if you're in a tech company, you want to make sure that legal knows about it.
Okay.
Even if it's nothing more than just sort of like a bit of a heads up.
Okay.
If you think you've got a problem, that's when you want to give them a heads up too.
Okay.
And especially if that problem hits the core of the business.
Okay. Interesting.
And so I have to sort of be vague about exactly when, because of course the core of the business is going to be different depending on your company.
Yeah. Anything else? I'm running out of questions before I start getting the stupid ones that I know you can't answer.
Oh, I'll answer anything. The answer might be to look at the
Where are all the bodies buried here in Microsoft?
Under building 34.
Oh, okay.
That's exactly where we put them.
Okay.
Well, that's why there's no building 7, right? Building 7 was the mausoleum.
Ah.
And then we had to get rid of that.
That's a fun little Skype hunt, though.
Yes.
Interns on. Can you go pick something up in Building 7? See how long it takes them to come back.
Well, now they teach it. Now they teach it in orientation.
Yeah.
Microsoft has this for people who don't work at the company. Microsoft has this inexplicable building numbering system where they're non-sequential and they just randomly skip. And I think it's the order in which they were built.
Yeah.
Except no, it's not, because then we flip over to 100 when we cross the highway for some reason.
Yeah. It's a confusing system.
It took me about a year. Actually, I can't say that because yesterday I had to grab a campus map, and I've been here for a year and a half to find a building. But that was to go out to Willows.
Ah, yeah. I went to Building 117, and that took some time.
Yeah.
Anything else that you could tell us about your work or being a lawyer or?
Don't go to law school.
Don't go to law school.
Don't go to law school.
It's funny. My friend Buzz Bregman's CEO of ActiveWorks, and he's a lawyer too. He told me the same thing. He said I hated being a lawyer.
You'll always hear it from people, but it's true. I mean, it's like people think we're kidding. The reason that we tell people not to go to law school is partly because it's a lot of work. Surprisingly, because you wouldn't necessarily think that. Yeah. And it's a different kind of work than engineering school or computer science. So maybe it would be refreshing. Certainly, if you've got a background in engineering or computer science and you want to become an attorney, you could be a patent lawyer and make buck. But like that said, I think I think there's a reason that lawyers, you see a lot of lawyers becoming screenwriters and things like that, and they want to get out. It can be a really not fun gig sometimes.
Yeah.
So what Pat wanted was
It's kind of interesting the way that we're always taught that there are two sides to every story, right?
Yeah.
So sometimes there's not. Sometimes there's only one side. And when you go and find the second side to the story, that can lead you into some very interesting and strange places.
Can you give us a general example?
Well, I can give you an example. Tobacco. Right? There are literally two sides to every story. Just sometimes the facts will seem to line up a lot on one side.
Yeah.
And it can be challenging. I remember I had a file, or I had a situation where I was working on a file back when I was in private practice, and we had a summer student working with us, and he looked at me at one point, and it was like 10 o'clock at night, because lawyers work these ridiculous hours. Like, it's like you going into ship, except it's all the time for us. And the guy looked at me, and he said, "Why do we never work for the good guy?" And I said to him, "Okay, you know what you're going to do right now? You can close your book, you can go home, and you're going to, or you go to the bar, go wherever, and you're going to think long and hard about the fact that you asked me that question, and I'm going to tell you the answer, and I want you to be willing to accept this. You get paid every 2 weeks, and you get paid very, very well. You get paid better than the people who work for the little guys.
Yeah.
And the fact is, that's because sometimes you take an unpleasant and uncomfortable position.
Yeah.
If you can't mentally take ownership of the fact that what you're going to do is sometimes not going to be fun, you got to go find something else to do.
Yeah.
Because this career isn't for you. And that's a really, really unfortunate thing about
Now,
this
are
job.
you working for a good guy right now?
I'm working for the greatest guy in the world, and that's why I get to go home at night,
Yeah.
and sleep happy and play my Xbox 360 because I got a 360, man. You better believe I got a 360.
All right, now if you work for the Xbox team, how do you get an Xbox? Other than waiting in line overnight in freezing temperatures like the guys at Best Buy the other night.
You come out and you go to stores on Christmas Eve when I believe there's going to be some new ones showing up. I keep reading in the newspapers.
Yeah.
You go to the store.
Yeah.
There will be, trust me, man. This is like the bane of my existence right now is those people who say Microsoft deliberately throttled the channel to create demand.
Yeah, it's just
trust me
ridiculous.
when I tell you we did not deliberately throttle the channel to create demand. Nothing would make us more happy than if there were 10 million homes in America that had an Xbox 360 in them today.
Yeah.
It is. I had to. Ironically, as you may be aware, people on the Xbox team were given a launch gift.
Yeah.
I was not on the Xbox team the day the launch gift went out, so I had to go find myself one by begging, borrowing, and stealing. And I actually have a work-related need to have one of these things on my shelf.
Yep.
Right? I have to be able to test the product.
Yep.
And when we do a download of games through Live Arcade, I actually have to go to Live Arcade and download it and make sure the download experience is good and make sure I'm happy with how that works,
Yep.
right? And how that implements in the real world. So I have a work-based need,
Excellent.
and I had to go.
You got the coolest lawyer gig in the industry, don't you?
Yeah, I'm thinking.
You get to play games at work.
I get to play them at home.
Yeah. You don't have to represent mass murderers.
Exactly. I get to go on conference calls for an hour, push mute, and sit there and play Halo.
Yeah.
Halo 1, by the way, not Halo 2.
Not Halo 2?
Not Halo 2. Some people, it's the big dispute. It's the pistol dispute, right? I liked the old pistol. So
Interesting. Well, the Halo 3 should be coming out soon, right? I didn't get an answer to that question.
And on that cheery note,
Bill already leaked it, unfortunately.
yeah, I mean, when the chief software architect lets people know that something's coming, I can sit here and smile at you as long as I want. People want to find out when, they got to do the work themselves.
Yeah. Well, cool.
Well, let's wrap.
Yeah. Thanks for
Thank you for
spending
having me.
some time. 50 minutes. Wow.
5-0?
Yeah.
Look at that.
Yeah. Well, thanks.
No, thank you.